Going on, guys, NealGuides here. In today's video I'll be talking to you about tactics and formation. It's going to be about the recent patch. There's some changes to some aspects, for example like constant pressures being changed. I'm just going to talk about not what the tactics do, but how they should be used. People don't understand, for example, how certain tactics affect their gameplay. So I'll be talking over that. It's quite a long video, so the timestamps are below in the description, so just do forward to the bit that really matters to you. But anyway, just kind of giving you a brief background. FIFA 18 custom tactics were much more different. It was much more complex. It was, in my opinion, it was better because it allowed you to do certain things. It's quite restricted this year. So like last year, you can organize, the free-form build-up play organization in the final third. Depending if you're shooting, if you're crossing, what happens, plays in the box. It's much more different this year. You can't do any of that. So that's the first thing to understand. Is much easier to do. And another thing is tactics do not affect your gameplay as much as they did in FIFA 18. Don't get me wrong, it's going to help you, but it's not like FIFA 18. It's not going to completely change the way you play at all. So this is my second account. It's a 30k team. Before I do start, just say one thing is don't ever copy anyone's tactics. Just because you see a pro player who's got 30-0 on YouTube, don't copy their tactics, because the truth is everyone plays different. If you are going to copy someone's tactics, try playing someone who finds you like a streamer and then copy their tactics. So let's say, for example, if you cross the ball in and you both play, for example, a 4-4-2 formation, then maybe copy his tactics and adapt the tactics. So play how you want to play. Anyway, going into tactics, just to kind of give you a brief overview, tactics can only help you go so far. Just bear that in mind and do remember that. So in my opinion, you should have 4 game plans. So by default, you're probably using, if you are aware, you're probably using balance. I Ben Yedder and CM. I stop him from Rabiot in game with my formations. Balanced I just use for chemistry purposes, get my team in full chemistry. Then you should have, in my opinion, 4. So have a formation to kind of close the game out. A defensive formation, maybe the formation you start on is quite conservative, quite reserved. Attacking, so let's say, for example, you can't break through your opponent's defense. You have an attacking formation, a bit more attacking than defensive. And ultra attacking formation, this is, for example, if you're down 2-0, you need to get a goal back, let's say 75 minutes. It's kind of last ditch. So anyway, just going into it now, I'm just going to be talking to you briefly about the different defense styles. It's after the 20th November, if you've seen the notes, they've changed it now. So pressure on heavy touch and press after possession loss. It doesn't kind of kill your stamina as it did. So I used to use this the entire game, and 70 minutes my center mids, my CDMs, they were basically dead. But after this new patch, it's going to reduce that a lot. So these two are really good. Constant pressure has been nerfed. Now constant pressure, if you use this the entire game, by 60 minutes your players are going to be useless and dead. So I wouldn't recommend using constant pressure for the whole game anyway. So anyway, just on defensive style, I would say keep it unbalanced. If you don't know what you're doing, leave it unbalanced. Especially if you know how to manually defend. I would say leave it unbalanced and then find out, for example, if you're too deep or if you're not pressing enough, and then start experimenting with what to use. I would say pressure and heavy touch is the best. It's the safest. It presses when you need to and only kind of commits forward when there's a clear chance of winning the ball. Press after possession loss is good, but again, if your player is playing 1-2, so you can easily just skip the ball around you to do that. Bear that in mind. Constant pressure, as I said, it's been nerfed. But for your ultra attacking formation, put constant pressure on. If you're chasing a game, the player's going to naturally, another player, especially in foot champs, are going to waste time. So you're going to want constant pressure on, just, to apply pressure. You don't want them to be passing around their back line and, half your players got a low depth on drop back. And in regards to drop back, I wouldn't suggest this at all, especially not in FIFA 19, especially that timed finesses are now the meta and the norm. It's the easiest way to score. Using drop back's gonna make you susceptible to a time finesse, which is the easiest way to score in this FIFA. So I would say balance is kind of it's kind of in between drop back and pressure on heavy touch. I kind of like. I think it's quite good, especially man defend. Now width. What you need to understand is, first things first is, width depends on the formation you're playing. Now, for example, I have a 4-1-4-1, which in my opinion is one of the most balanced formations in this game. With 4-1-4-1, you don't want a high width. Now you're probably thinking, why not? Now I see this so many times. People have 9 or 8 width. The problem is your formation is naturally wide as it is. By having a higher width, all you're going to do is you're going to be creating gaps in the middle, so in between the center mids and the CDMs and your left mids and right mids. So you don't want a high width. It's the same if you use, for example, a 4-1-2-1-2. So just going to go quickly to 4-1-2-1-2. You don't want, for example, a low width. A low width is the same thing. You know, if you have a low defensive width on 4-1-2-1-2, everyone's going to be packed together, compact and very narrow when you're defending, and they're just going to exploit your wing. So you kind of want it balanced in the middle, I would say, depending on your formation. So 4-1-2-1-2, maybe you can have a bit more width. If you're using a 4-4-2 formation or 4-4-1-1 formation, you know, it makes sense to have a bit of a lower width because naturally your team is wider out. Now depth, in my opinion, do not go below 3 or 2. Now in this game, as I said, finesse shots is kind of the way to score now, the main way. I think because most of my goals are all finessed outside the box. With low depth, you're just going to invite pressure outside the box. You don't really want that. Same with high depth. You know, you don't really want to be too high up because you're going to be exposed. If you play defensive, I would say 4 or maybe 5. But I wouldn't go more than 7 unless you really know how to defend. Maybe you can put 7 on your ultra attacking formation, but I wouldn't recommend it for your defensive or attacking formations. Now another thing you have to understand, which I'll get onto, is these two widths go hand in hand. People don't know that, but I'll explain that later on. So offensive style, now again, if you don't know what you're doing, put it on balanced. AI is much more intuitive this year, it's much more intelligent. Let the players decide what they want to do, in my opinion. You know, there might be a player running on your right wing and you may want to do a through ball to them. If you have it on possession, you know, they may come short instead of going forward. And the same thing, you know, you may have a centre forward, for example, and you want him to come short. If you have it on long ball, he might run forward. You might not want him to. So I would say balanced is the best. Long ball is quite good if you're playing defensively. I don't really recommend using it. It makes you, it's no one really plays a high line, so I wouldn't really recommend it too much. If you want to get in behind, just use the player instructions. Fast build-up play after the patch is actually gone better. People don't understand this, but it's actually been improved. Players don't really go forward gung-ho, but I still wouldn't recommend it. You kind of commit your players a bit too much. It makes you really vulnerable and exposed for a counter-attack. So maybe if on your ultra attacking formation, which you change to an 80th minute, maybe fast build-up play would be good then, but I wouldn't recommend it in the earlier stages of the game, only if you really need it. Possession is probably really good. I mean, although if you play outside the box, you pin your opponent in the box, and you're trying to create an angle for a finesse shot, this is really good. So maybe have a formation on balance, maybe one on possession. So you know you have players coming short to you instead of coming forward, they're going to come short to you. And although your team will not make runs going forward, they're going to be, if you get outside your opponent's box, you pass around. You know, you can make the angle, create the angle for the time finesse. So it's really good. But as I said, balance for me is probably the best. Now width, offensive style is, it depends on how you play. If you prefer wingers, have obviously a higher width. You know, if you like to be more narrow and compact, a low width. Again, this depends on your formation, just like defensive. So, for example, if I'm playing a 4-4-1, 4-4-1-1, you know, I might, if I want my players narrowing together, I'll do 1 or 2 because it's quite a wide formation naturally. Obviously, I'm not going to do high width as I explained earlier, otherwise you're just going to create gaps in between. But another thing you need to understand is a lot of players are good, but they keep conceding on counters. The reason why is both these width go hand in hand. A lot of people don't know this, is if you have high width on defensive, and let's just say for example a low narrow width, what's going to happen is when you defending, you're going to have a high width, and when you transition to attack, your players have to come closer together. This may help a little bit, it might, trick your opponent, change the play, but it leaves you exposed. One, because if, for example, you have a high defensive and you lose the ball, and let's say you go to offensive, you get the ball, you counter and you lose the ball again, your players have to go back to a high width defensive formation, and there'll be spaces in behind your defense, between your centre mids, between your midfielders, to get in behind. And a lot of stamina is used. So if you have, for example, a load of, let's say you're kind of defending really tight and narrow, and you have a high offense, you want to exploit the wings. If you have such a big gap, your players are going to use so much stamina, because once you get the ball, you have to run to like a wide position to hug the sideline in a sense. So do understand, these have to be similar. I would try to not have 3 difference between them. So if you have this on 3, don't put this more than 6. Try to keep it quite similar, that's what I would say. I know people like to defend more in the middle, so maybe you prefer a narrow width. But if you are offensive, but also, as I said, do remember it depends on your formation. If you're using a 4-1-2-1-2 and you want to attack down the middle, then obviously you want a lower width. So do bear that in mind when you're changing tactics. The width for one formation won't be the same as another formation, if that makes sense. Now, players in the box. Now, the truth is, in this game, it's easier to score outside the box. That's the honest truth. If you cross the ball in, like, I'm going to insert a clip here. In FIFA 18, it was much more different. To score a goal, you had to, build your play up, and you had to get in the box, and you used to do a low-driven shot. Now, fair enough, it was impossible to kind of defend against a low-driven shot. Once you're in the angle, you're going to score. But the difference is you had to actually get into that position, which was really hard in the first place. In this FIFA, it's the complete opposite. It's more, you get rewarded for kind of staying outside the box and just shooting a time finesse. So if you do play with time finesses, have this on 2 or 3. You don't want this on 1, because if it's on 1, the opposition's defensive line will be a bit more forward. You kind of want on 2, so you have 1 or 2 players running in the box, kind of pushing their defensive line back to create more space in the midfield. If you do cross it, I would say 4 or 5. Personally, me, I don't cross it. I do sometimes do ground crosses along the wing, but you can actually do player instructions to get into the box. And I'm just going to briefly, instructions will be another video, but do understand that instructions and tactics go hand in hand. If you have, for example, low players to get in the box, and you have your instructions, let's say, for all your players to get in the box, understand that instructions will override your tactics. So if, for example, you have, let's say, my 4 midfielders, and let's say my centre forward to get forward, get into the box, the problem is that even though your tactics will ask no players to get in the box, instructions will override the tactics. So do bear that in mind. So if, for example, you're playing possession, yet you have, for example, a player on getting behind, they're still going to get in behind. But the players who are basically unbalanced, there will be more possession based. So do bear that in mind. They kind of go hand in hand. It kind of contradicts each other. It's a bit more complicated than that, but that's the best way of explaining it. Just bear that in mind. So as I said, if you do cross the ball a lot, have 6 or 7, but I would say you don't want complete players in the box. It's going to make you susceptible to a counter attack, so do bear that in mind. Now, corners, to be honest, if you pass corners like I do, have corners on low. I don't, especially after they patch the near post kind of headers, unless you have someone like Cristiano Ronaldo, then maybe put 3 players in as a distraction and have Ronaldo in there as well. Otherwise, I will leave this on 1 and 2. Same with free kicks. You if you shoot, you don't really need anyone in the box. If you pass, just have 2. Your players, if you use free kick set piece tactics, with left trigger, right trigger, R2, L2, it's still gonna have those players there, so it won't make that much of a difference. But as I said, do bear in mind that instructions do affect the players, so do bear that in mind. I'll have instructions for another video, because this video is getting quite long, but I hope this helps. I hope this kind of goes over some basics and some things that you might not know. So for example, you may have had this we've had tactics like this and you may be winning every game, then as soon as you change to a high offensive, you may have lost the game. Do understand that these do go hand in hand, everything is affecting. But as I said, it's not a miracle worker, it might help you, but it's not going to change the complete way you play. It's not like FIFA 18 where it generally did change a lot. So I would say bear that in mind anyway. But thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to message me or leave a comment down below and I'll answer them. Thanks for watching, guys.